Hilchos. Good morning. Good morning. Okay, let's get started. We were learning yesterday. We learned two important halachos. One, the first part, we learned that with a bill of sale or a bill of gift, if the buyer loses the bill of sale and there were witnesses, he's allowed to go to the witnesses and ask them to write up a new bill of sale for him, even without the consent of the seller. And the reason is because there's no concern in that situation of exploiting an innocent party, okay? Like there is with a promissory note and encumbered property, okay? And so, and in that situation, whereas we learned before by a promissory note that if you write up a new one, you have to put the current date and not the original date of the loan. With a bill of sale or a bill of gift, it's just the opposite. You write the original date on the bill of sale, because if you write the current date, there's an opposing concern, which the Rav Stern writes as follows. He says, Davka zman rishon, aval ein lichtov zman sheni, b'chayshinan dilma achar shekana okibel osa. He says, because we're worried that if you write the later date on the bill of sale, the matana helech hamakabel halach hamakabel o hakona v'chazer umachra o nasna l'mocher. He says, we have to be concerned. Let's say after I legally purchase a piece of property, a used car, whatever the example is, I went ahead and I sold it to another party. Okay, I sold it to another party. But then I claim to the witnesses that I lost my bill of sale. And what happens? I say, write me a new one. Now I have evidence. If they were to put the new date of when they write the new one, the new bill of sale, then we could turn to the buyer and say to him, to the new buyer and say to him, I'm sorry, I wasn't authorized to sell it to you. I didn't take legal acquisition of this object until after I sold it to you. So it wasn't mine to sell you. You have to give it back. Okay? So, and you could say, well, the original, so in other words, he went ahead, and then he would be, so the illustration that he's giving is that there's not a third party, but let's say the seller sells it, Reuven sells an object to Shimon. Shimon now has the used car. Shimon then gives it back to Reuven or sells it back to Reuven. But but then afterwards, he tells the witnesses that I lost the bill of sale. Can you write me a new one? If they write the later date, he'll be able to show evidence that it's really still his, because he says he gave it back, but he really didn't give it back. He says, however, if the witnesses write in the second bill of sale that this is a post-dated bill of sale because the sale took place earlier, and we're just signing on the date that we are of the date of the writing of this bill of sale, but the actual sale took place earlier, so then that's fine. And also, if the seller is present and he says to write the bill of sale, then you can write the later date. Okay, so basically there are ways around it that you can get around it. Okay, and the other concern is that you don't have to worry about a person purchasing property and then playing games and saying that, write me a post-dated bill of sale. Um, that's not there. There's no concern about. I guess there's no concern about foul play in that situation. If you write the original date. And the other concern was you don't have to worry that he's gonna have two bills of sale, because two bills of sale is not a big deal because it'll be on the same property. Usually there's an identification of what is being sold, whether it's property or whether it's chattel. You'll be able to identify based on the description in the shtar what exactly was sold. Shehi karka miyuchedes perish below dami la'el bahalva'a dahasam yachal hamal v'legabos al yidei shtaru mikol nechse halove. He says with a promissory note, if a creditor has two promissory notes, even if they're for the same amount, he could collect twice. So therefore, that's not okay. If the witnesses were to write a second promissory note, they wouldn't. You would potentially have a problem. He says, but rather a bill of sale or a bill of gift, which is a discrete, concrete item. The shtar will contain the words that Reuven sold to Shimon a particular field whose boundaries are so and so. There's no concern that you're going to use a second shtar, a second bill of sale to collect twice. Okay, so that was the first part of our halacha that we saw yesterday. The second part of the halacha that we saw yesterday is, let's say a debtor makes a partial payment on a loan, and he says to the creditor, okay, I borrowed $10,000 from you, and here's $3,000 back as partial payment. Let's write up a new promissory note. Give me the old promissory note, we'll destroy it, and write up a new promissory note that I owe you $7,000. So the halacha is lo yichtavu bo ha'edem mizman harishon elizman she'omdim bo ata. So he says the witnesses cannot write the date of the original loan; they can only write the current date. Ki shibud harishon nifka ata b'chazarasa olalova. He says because if they give back the original promissory, if the creditor gives back the original promissory note, and they tear it up, then his lien on the property, on any property from that date of the original loan, is now removed. And you can't place a new lien retroactively. You can only place a lien on property from now on. So therefore, both shalomi das halova lo yichtavu klal afilu zman she'omdim bo ata holachvar asur shlichusam. And certainly the witnesses must get authorization from the debtor, even when the creditor says, let's write up a new note. So, as I had mentioned, the solution to this problem would be that instead of writing up a new promissory note, the creditor can hold on to the old promissory note for $10,000 and just give a receipt to the debtor for $3,000, and both of them will have to hold on to their pieces of paper. Okay, so lo yichtavu bo ha'edem v'chulei, but based on osin lo shtar mimashen isher chayev lo, v'yichtavuhu mizman rishon da'ali mikocham kidle'el sif lametes. Based could write a new promissory note. In other words, if we go to Based and the debtor pays the $3,000 in the presence of the Based, and he asks the Based to write up a new promissory note, please take the old promissory note from him, destroy it, and write a new one for $7,000 instead of $10,000. That would be legal. As we mentioned before, the Based does have the power to generate a lien out of thin air, because we have this principle of hefker, Based hefker. The Based can appropriate property at their whim, and this has many applications, as we mentioned a little bit before. But basically, the Beis Din can, if they feel in their eyes that property should be have a lien placed on it, they can do that, even though it's going back retroactively, which is not normally doable. The Beis Din can also simply paskin that you don't own your property anymore and award it to somebody else. Yeah. I mean, obviously, it has to be based on jurisprudence. It has to be based on a reason, right? But they have the authority to do that, even though normally a regular citizen would not have the power, al pi halacha, to create a certain transfers of property just willy-nilly. The Beis Din can do that without even generating a kinyan or anything at all. Okay. All right, let's go on to the next halacha. Mishapora miktsas chovo. Person pays back, right? We had the example of the $10,000 loan. A person, Shimon is the debtor, he pays back 3,000 of it. Okay? Vihishlishes ashtar. And then the creditor and the debtor arrange that the promissory note is going to be placed in escrow. Va'omar lishlish im lo avi lecha hamos ad yom haploni litnam lemalve tein lo shtaro sheyigva kulo mimeni. So, and he says to the escrow company, because basically the debtor says, I know you can't give me back the promissory note because I've only paid you 3,000. And I know that I don't want you to hold on to the promissory note because you could use it to recollect what I've already paid you. So let's give it to a shlish. Let's give it to a third party, an escrow holder, and we'll tell him, you hold on to the note. You're aware that I've already paid him $3,000, and therefore you have the note. If I don't pay him back the balance of $7,000 by February 1st, give him give the creditor back the promissory note for $10,000. Basically, I'm accepting a penalty that if I don't pay by a certain date, I will owe the full amount. And maybe that could have been arranged between the two of them. It's not clear from the halacha, but this is the circumstance that he's dealing with. Vihigia hazman velo hevi lo hamos. So let's say February 1st arrives, and the debtor has not come back with the balance of what he owes. Lo yitain hashlisha sashtar liyad hamalva. In that situation, the escrow holder should not give the promissory note back to the creditor. Why? Shazu asmachtahi. Because that is considered to be what's called an asmachta, which is, who remembers that term asmachta? Anyone remember? All right, you're thinking of it from the Talmudic parlance of an asmachta being a pasuk that is cited by Chazal, that is not that is only an allusion to the law. And it's not meant to be taken seriously, but as a biblical source for the law. But it's just something that the rabbis can lean on, can point to. So that's one definition. The word asmachta has two definitions. That one is the one that Paul mentioned is the first one. And then you had said that the first time, Paul.
Yeah.
And
I still can't remember.
and what is the second definition of an asmachta? It's a statement which is exaggerative, which is not meant to be taken seriously. So, for example, if a guy says, if I don't pay you, I'm going to give you my house. I borrowed $10,000 from you. If I don't pay you by February 1st, you can have my house, right? That's an exaggerative statement because your house is worth many times the $10,000. Okay, so there are many times when Chazal say that a person who makes an exaggerative statement his statement is not legally binding, if contextually you understand that it's an exaggerative statement. And that's what the word asmachta means over here. It's not meant to be taken at face value. Okay. Okay. So in this kind of situation, debtor says, if I don't come back with full payment to the escrow company by February 1st, you can relinquish the full promissory note back to the creditor. The escrow company should not do so. Shazu asmachti shesamach alova bedaito sheyi lo mos, because the debtor felt so certain that he was going to be able to come up with a balance by that date, kishiagi azman, velo gamar v'hikna lamal velo ilam. But he never really meant for the creditor to be able to get the promissory note. He was making a statement to say, you can rely on me. And you know how much you can rely on me? Take back the promissory note if I don't come by February 1st. But he didn't really mean it. He didn't mean it. No one in their right mind would do that, would say that. Why then did he say it? He wanted to demonstrate how sure he was of himself that he would be able to come up with the money by that date. Okay? So, Kufayin Ches, and then obviously the creditor will have legal recourse. You can take him to Beis Din. He has the escrow company's testimony. He has, and he has the promissory note, and so forth. So he does have legal recourse. He's not entitled to get interest on the loan.
He wants to charge the full amount again, and if they already pay partial, it's like getting a profit, no?
Yeah, well, he wouldn't. That's the point. Is that so? What if he said this is not an asmachta? Is really what you're asking. What if he were to say explicitly and put it down in writing, this is not an asmachta? Could there be a problem of rebit, of ribis, of charging interest? Okay, that we'll see. That is not something that is being discussed here, because he's saying that it doesn't have any power, right? So you're saying, well, what if it does have power? Because, yeah, then there could potentially be a problem of ribis. Now, it wouldn't be a biblical ribis because it wasn't stipulated at the time of the loan. The only time ribis is an isser deoraisa, is a biblical prohibition, is if at the time of the loan it is stipulated that you've lent me 10,000, I will owe you 17,000, something like that. That's prohibited. That's considered to be ribis. But here, the loan was for 10,000. And I have to pay you back 10,000 by, let's say, January 15th. January 15th comes, I only can come up with 3,000, but I say, I know for sure I'm going to come up with the balance by February 1st. Give me another 2 weeks. And if I don't, you can take back the promissory note. Okay, that's what we're dealing with over here. Lo yitain hashlisha sashtar liyad hamalva. So the escrow person should not give the original promissory note back to the creditor. Shlish shehechzir hashtar lamalva bizman shelo hayelo lahachzir begava bo hamalva shelo kedin. Let's say you have an escrow guy, a person basically who's holding on to paper, and he gives the note back to the creditor at a time when he should not have. And as a result, the creditor collects on a debt illegally. In other words, let's say it was agreed by all parties that the third party escrow would hold on to the promissory note until February 1st. But because of pressure or because of whatever efforts the creditor made, he was able to convince the escrow person to give him the promissory notes earlier than what was originally agreed upon. And he takes possession of the promissory note in January instead of February. and then he goes ahead and uses it to collect money from the debtor illegally, because that was not the original arrangement. Ashlish potter dahavigrama binizakin. So the halacha is that the escrow company is not liable for any damages. So that's the first halacha that Rav Stern wants to bring us over here, is that even though I've caused the debtor to lose money, which could potentially be a lot of money. Let's say when you deal with corporate entities, right? You have, with banks and things like that, forcing someone to pay or seizing someone's assets before the debt has matured could potentially cause devastating financial loss, right? And yet the halacha is that if an escrow company makes a mistake and they do that, halachically they're not liable because it's causative. They haven't caused direct damage, they've only done causative damage, indirect damage, by just giving the authority to someone else to collect before they were supposed to. But that's only when they give the promissory note to the creditor, and the creditor seizes assets illegally based on their action, do we say that they are exempt. But let's say the escrow company does something more damaging. Instead of they're holding the promissory note, and instead of giving it prematurely to the creditor, they give it outright to the debtor before the creditor has been able to collect on the loan. And now the creditor has no ability to collect the debt. So in that situation, the escrow company is liable, because that's a much more direct type of causation, because they've literally taken the instrument that is worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, and they've squandered their responsibility by giving it to the wrong person. I mean, you can imagine the escrow companies holding documents for collection of a debt, and a guy comes along and he says, "Hi, my name is Ruvain. I'm here to collect. The date has arrived. Please give me the promissory note so I can take my debtor to court." Well, it turns out that Ruvain is not Ruvain. He's really Shimon. And they forgot to ask him for his driver's license, for his identification. Yeah. Or they just made a mistake, a clerical error. So in that situation, the escrow company is going to be liable. Does who? What, the escrow company will say what? Well, if they lose the document, they're also liable. It's like if you burn your friend's documents. If I burn your documents, even if I didn't mean to, right? But I was through my negligence, I've destroyed things that are legal instruments that have financial value, so I have to pay you back for that. The imta sofer, because of mana b'makom masayim, nispoir le'el seif lamed ches b'Imrei Yaakov sif katan kuf ayin aleph depater. He says, we had previously learned, if you remember this, we didn't learn this too long ago, we had learned that if a sofer makes a mistake, if a scribe makes a mistake and makes a printing error, and instead of saying that the debt was for 200, he wrote 100 by accident. So he's also going to be patur in that case. That's causative damage, because it's the people involved in the transaction who have an obligation to read the contract before everything is enacted. Velo dami lisorev shtaroso shel chavero. He says it's not analogous to destroying my friend's promissory notes. Mishum de besorev shtar kvar hayalo shtar bezeh sorfo. He says, what's the difference? When a person has a promissory note and I destroy it, so then I'm taking something that was perfectly formed, and it had a financial value to it, and I destroy it. Al kain habile mazik, so I'm a damager, and I have to pay for the damages. Masha ein kain besofer shadain lo haylo hazuchus, enu ela kimono milahatzil mamona. He says, but a scribe who misprints a document that can be used for collection, that it hasn't been created yet. In other words, the instrument for legal collection of money is in the process of being created. It hasn't been created and then I destroy it, but I've malformed the document that could be used as an instrument. So that's the logical difference between the two. In the one case, I'm destroying something that already had financial value as a legal instrument for collection. And in this case of the scribe, I'm in the process of creating it, and while I'm creating it, I don't create it properly. Therefore, since that's considered to be more of a causative act, and therefore I can't be held liable. Okay, getting back to our halacha. If it's causative, it's indirect, is what we mean by causative. So then you cannot be held accountable. Yeah. It has to be a direct form of damage, like destroying someone's instrument. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Correct. We attribute that malfeasance to the creditor, who really should have waited until February 1st, and he's collecting early. When we give the promissory note to the wrong party, however, give it to the debtor instead of giving it to the creditor, that's considered to be direct damage. Okay. That's right. Yeah. Okay. So getting back to the halacha that we were speaking about, which is the idea of asmachta, that I tell the escrow company, if I don't come back by February 1st to pay back the balance, give the whole note back to the creditor. We don't do that. Escrow company should not do that, because it's understood that he didn't mean to be taken literally. The imkanu mimenu bebeis din chashuv harei zekona. However, like going back to Mordechai's question, what if he's able to bolster the assurance by saying, I don't mean it as an asmachta, I mean to be taken seriously? So how would you do that? You would take the document and register it with Beis Din, and you would say in front of the Beis Din, if I don't come back with the balance by February 1st, I want the escrow company to give it back to the creditor so that he can collect the original full amount. Okay? And I make a kinyan in Beis Din. I indebt myself in the presence of a Beis Din. So then that is a legal statement. V'hu shelo yehi onus, provided that he's not coerced. Kagon she'ikvo nahar ocholi milavo. When we say coerced, what we mean to say is, let's say something happens where I was on my way on February 1st to pay back the balance of the debt. And all of a sudden, the plane had mechanical failure, and I had to land on an island, right? And I wasn't able to get you the money, but I have it, and I was on my way to pay you. So in those kinds of circumstances where I had every intention of paying you back, but I was literally prevented through some kind of mishap, right? So, or I got sick or something like that. So then the halacha is that they should not deliver the promissory note to the malva in that situation. But that's provided that it's not a common mishap. But if it's a common mishap, like I left it until the very last moment of February 1st, like I was planning to come to your house at 11:45 p.m. on February 1st to pay you back the balance. And I got caught in traffic, right? There was a car accident on the way. and I made it to your house. I didn't make it until the following morning or whatever it was. So then that's considered a negligent kind of mishap. And I should have known that to give myself more time. And in that situation, that we don't buy your story. In other words, and the based in or the escrow company is permitted to deliver the shtar back to the creditor. What about the question of ribis that Mordechai was asking about? He doesn't discuss that issue over here, but I think it's a valid question. We'll have to, I think that the answer would be perhaps that it's considered a gift and is not related to the original loan, but I'm not 100% sure. Okay, we will continue.